Okay, today we're going to talk about a brand new inverter from Fronius, or it's really just an addition to the Fronius GEN24 platform, or the GEN24 inverters, and it's the Fronius 10 kilowatt and 8 kilowatt GEN24 Primo. So we're going to talk about a lot of advantages of this inverter, but at the end we'll talk about one massive disadvantage where you may not want to buy this inverter for your place. Correct?
Oh, okay. Yeah, it sounds controversial, but yeah, let's talk about that.
Okay, we'll start off, Dan. Let's talk about the build of it because it's probably the biggest thing. It's not a feature for the customer, but it's pretty important the way they've built this.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so the Gen24 is very different from anyone who's seen the old Snap inverters. The obvious design feature is the big fan on the front.
Yep.
Are you a fan of the fan, Mark?
I love the fan. I love active cooling. Fronius is the only inverter on the market that I know of that has got external fans, and they've stuck to their guns on that. Tell us why it's so important.
Fronius engineers are adamant that active cooling should be in all power conversion technology, simply because you get a longer lifespan out of the device if you keep the components cooler.
And I've tested this down in my lab downstairs where I've had two identical solar systems running on two inverters, one being the Fronius GEN24 and then one being a bunch of different cheaper Chinese inverters. And the difference in temperature is at least 10 degrees, and one inverter was more than 15 degrees different when they're running at full capacity. So that's a fairly big difference on the lifetime of the inverter, but you're also talking about limiting, right?
Yeah, that's right. So here in Queensland, where we have really hot weather in summertime, you'll find that with passive cooled inverters that just use convection cooling, they start to derate quite a bit by as much as 10-15% on those really hot days. And that's really when you want the most amount of power, because generally you're cranking your air cons and you want all the solar power you can get. But with the active cooling on Fronius, it'll continue to run at its max power output.
Yeah, and again, and I thought this was theoretical, but in some of the tests that I've done downstairs, where I've heated up the room, to be fair, but it wasn't in full sun or anything. It was the inverters were in my office, and the Fronius GEN24 inverter just kept on going, cranking its fan, where the other inverters were derating and they weren't outputting their full power. Obviously not great for the components, but not great for your production either.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So you've got this lovely big heat sink. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So the radial heat sink has actually won design awards, and it's designed to efficiently remove the heat from the inverter, even without the fan running. But once the fan starts up, it forces the air across that heat sink, and then you have the components inside kept as cool as possible. Now hot summers here in Queensland, it's a big feature.
Yeah, it's great. It's a really great design. One other little feature is these little lights down the bottom that aren't on at the moment, but you just tap a little button, because Wi-Fi connectivity is a really big concern, right? Because you want to keep your monitoring up. And if for whatever reason your Wi-Fi drops out, they've made this really simple. One tap your button, one tap of your WPS button on your modem, and you reconnect to the internet.
That's right, yeah. I mean, we always encourage people to monitor their inverters on SolarWeb. That's our monitoring platform, and you can only really do that if you've got your Wi-Fi connectivity happening.
Yeah, I've got a short video how to do that if you're interested, and I'll link to it above. Okay, next point, and this is one of those features for customers that some people call a gimmick. I reckon it's really cool. Tell us about PV Point, Dan.
Okay, so PV Point is a feature in the Gen24 inverters where if you've had a blackout, you can still get some power out of your solar system. So the other week, we had a blackout on our street during the day, and my wife said to me, "Oh, we've got solar. How come we don't have any power?" And I had to explain that with all grid connect inverters, it's a requirement that they do shut down for safety reasons when the network has a blackout.
So obviously you don't come home and talk to your wife all about solar, I take it.
No, the technical side of solar doesn't really interest her too much.
That's right. It's not for everyone. Fair enough. Okay, so this is the way we set it up. So we put this little switchboard, which is sort of like an off-grid switchboard, that we put next to your inverter, and then we install a power point. It's called PV Point. PV just means solar, so it's a solar power point. We put this next to your inverter normally. We can run it into your kitchen at extra cost. and that power point will run in a blackout. Now, let's say it's Saturday and you're going, I don't know, washing your car with a gurney. You can't plug it into this, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's only active or becomes active when there is a blackout, and it'll be able to supply about up to 3 kilowatts of power. Obviously, the sun's got to be shining and you've got your solar power there. So when there's a blackout, you can plug into that power point.
3 kilowatts is a fair bit. So you can run a toaster and a kettle at the same time, right? If you wanted to. So you could run your fridge, your freezer, your telly.
Yeah, the important thing is the beer in the fridge.
The beer fridge and the football on the telly.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yep, you can keep watching that even when there's a blackout, and that's without even having to have a battery. So that's the big feature of it is you don't have to install a battery to get some backup power.
We charge around about $350 or $400 to do this. There's a little bit of work involved. It's not just a inbuilt feature; it's an add-on. But I reckon for $350, it's not bad. We had a customer at Brookfield the other day. He has blackouts regularly. He absolutely loves it. 2 days after we did it, he had a blackout and he was running tools and this and that around the house. So can be a really good feature for just a little bit extra. So.
Yeah. There's some areas where blackouts happen pretty regularly, so a lot of people are going to like it.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, the next new thing about this inverter, Dan, it's a Fronius GEN24 inverter, but you've also got the Fronius GEN24 Plus. What's the difference between those two inverters?
That's right. So the GEN24 is a standard grid connect inverter, but this unique feature of being able to upgrade that to a battery hybrid inverter, and that's what then turns it into a GEN24 Plus.
Yeah, okay. So with software, like we just go onto Fronius SolarWeb, the platform, and we can unlock the hybrid feature of this inverter, which then turns it into an inverter that can charge a battery, the BYD battery.
Yeah, that's right. So it becomes a full battery hybrid inverter. And the great thing about this is a lot of people are interested in batteries and are looking to get batteries, but then they get the price and they think, it's a little bit high at the moment. Maybe I'll do it later on. And so they can get the GEN24 as a standard grid connect inverter, and they're able to then wait until they actually install the battery to upgrade it to the GEN24 Plus.
Hey, I want to tell you about this objection that I had when I was having a debate that we were recording with Jake from Penrith Solar. Shout out to Jake. And he was having a complaint saying, the hardware's already there. Why are they charging me for this? And I don't know if you've got a good response to that, Dan, but I just kind of think there's been years and years of R&D. I think I was over in Fronius in Austria in 2017, and they were talking about this inverter coming out. So much research put into this. The components for the charger probably don't cost that much, right? It's all the R&D that goes behind it. So my understanding, or the way that I see it, is Fronius is saying, look, here you go. You can have a basic inverter. Don't pay for the R&D. Don't pay for all those years of work that we've made this really efficient hybrid inverter. Award-winning, by the way, in that combination. But if you decide a couple of years down the track that you want to put a battery on, then you can pay for all that R&D and you can unlock your hybrid function of the inverter, right?
Yeah, that's right. So the GEN24 pricing that's come out is a little bit higher than our older model snap inverters that some people might be familiar with. But the reason they've been able to put all of this new technology into the GEN24 is including the battery hybrid function and still keep the price relative to the old models, is being able to then have a user pay features if they want to upgrade to a GEN24 Plus and install that battery. And the flip side is, if you don't ever install the battery, you don't ever pay for it.
I think it really helps customers not to decide, do I have to spend more money on a hybrid inverter now or not? No, well, you don't have to anymore with the Fronius GEN24.
Yeah.
Loving it how it couples with the BYD battery. I really do like this battery. I've done a bunch of reviews on it and comparing it to Tesla, and I'm doing a video at the moment about picking the correct size BYD battery. We'll do links to that above or maybe down in the notes or something.
I mean, yeah, the BYD battery has been chosen by Fronius because of BYD's very reliable and safe product.
Okay, let's talk about the biggest problem with this inverter. It's not so much the inverter, but it's the grid that you connect it to.
The network puts a restriction on how much power you can send back to the grid. So generally here in Queensland, we find that's 5 kilowatt export power limit, which means that if you have a bigger system, which is really common now for people to get bigger systems, even 10 kilowatt single phase, you're still only allowed to send up to 5 kilowatts of power back to the grid. So that means if you're not using that extra power of your 10 kilowatts, then the inverter is going to have to ramp down its production because it can only send 5 kilowatts back to the grid.
Right, yeah. So it's fine if you've got a large hot water system that you can time to run during the day or use with smart controls. If you've got a pool pump, if you're at home using the aircon, charging your EV, whatever it is. But if you go away during the day and the only thing that's running at home is your fridge, probably a 10 kilowatt inverter with 13 kilowatts of solar panels on it, being export limited to 5 kilowatts is a little bit of waste of your money, right?
Yeah, I mean, people are going to bigger and bigger systems. Like the average system size is well over 8 kilowatts now for residential single phase. I think the point there is people are trying to future-proof themselves. Maybe they're thinking, oh, I am going to get a battery later, or I am going to buy an EV, so I will at some point need this extra power. But right now, if they're not using that power during the day, then it may get curtailed and you might not be using that power that you could otherwise have used.
Yeah, sure. So, customer really needs to think about that. I'd hate to install a massive system, at a two-person household when they're never going to buy an EV or never going to buy a battery, and they're just completely limiting that system and not getting anywhere near the full usage out of that system. But for a lot of families, we're finding an 8 kilowatt inverter or a 10 kilowatt inverter. The best economy of scale is fill your roof with solar panels and then get an inverter to match it quite often,
Yeah, it's about that word future-proofing. Think about what you're going to be purchasing over the next few years and think about your power use in the future. And when you install your solar, do it once, do it right the first time.
Yeah, and to be fair, even if you aren't using all that power, just think about rainy days. Early in the morning, your system's going to be producing 13 kilowatts of panels is going to be producing more than 6.6 at all of those odd times a year and in winter and things like that. So, as long as people go into it eyes wide open, they understand export limiting and what it's going to do to their system, fair play. Look, we've been loving this inverter. We've sold so many of these already. We've just received our shipment. If customers are interested, give us a call or your local Fronius installer. Thanks for coming, Dan.
Thanks, Mark. Good to be here.